So my name is Jean-Paul Melaga. I am the founder and CEO of Smart Phorce, which is a tech startup. And what we do basically is market survey through apps. And we pay out people via mobile money to answer questions.
Welcome to the Africa Tech Roundup.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And so we're going to start with how a finance professional with a fairly cushy job working for a leading international bank goes from doing that to becoming a startup founder. Tell us who you worked for before you became a startup founder.
Well, I started my career with Lehman Brothers doing M&A, and then I moved to Standard Chartered Bank, then Renaissance Capital, where I was head of Francophone Africa, and then my last job was with the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi, where I was head of Africa, and the Bank of Tokyo Mitsubishi being the fifth largest bank in the world in terms of total assets, so pretty big bank.
And here's my fascination with that particular role. I grew up in Southeast Asia as a child, and Japanese culture is unique, even in terms of Far East culture and their closest relatives in terms of like the conservative vibes you get in Japan, Korea, China, perhaps. But it's so unique. Help me understand the headspace or the thinking the average sort of Japanese financial institutional professional has about Africa as a proposition, as an investment destination, as a investment target, as a growth proposition. Give me a sense of what would be typical.
Oh boy, I was gonna stay silent to respond, to you, but then we on radio, kind of, sort of speaking. So
on the internet, bro.
Internet, sorry, I'm so old school.
It's cool. Radio's still here. It's all right.
No, but Japan has no connection whatsoever with Africa. That's the fact. It's an island that was isolated. They were very, very close to the rest of the world. It's only when the Meiji area started, that they started trading with the rest of the world. But even so, it was very kind of at arm's length. They have no history of strong colonization. Obviously, they invaded a few countries which still, resent them for that, like Korea and China.
And the Philippines is actually where I grew up.
Exactly. But overall, there was no influx of foreign population coming to Japan and living there. So for them, forget about Africa, even Asia, for them it's like it's already alien. Talking about Africa, different color, different culture, they don't know anything. Even geographically, we're so distant, we're so far apart from them that they have no contact whatsoever. The only thing they know about Africa is what they know through CNN. And they will be very candid about it. They'll say, listen, we don't know anything about Africa. So any proposition, any deal you bring from Africa will be highly scrutinized. When I say highly scrutinized, it's going to take forever to be approved. So typically what it would take is bringing them from London to South Africa to see for themselves and to discuss with the customers and realize that these guys are highly educated. They know what they're doing. Their money is safe. But even managing to bring them from London to South Africa took a while because some of them were afraid. They wouldn't tell you, but they would I don't want to go there. But with time, I guess, very often when people were asking me, what do you do in banking? I used to say 50% of my time was education. 50% of my time was explaining, selling the African story, not doing some very fancy transaction and business development, just plain education, saying, see, this is a map of Africa. This is how it looks like. This is what we need. This is what we do. These are the key facts, etc., etc.
Oh, my word. So explain how you go from that to becoming a startup founder. I don't want to presume anything, but it didn't exactly sound like a party what you just described.
Well, it's you just get used to it. But it's true. It's fair to say that it was one of the many reasons why I decided to leave, because I was just getting frustrated. I could see a lot of fantastic deals that I couldn't do because of all the constraints, all the credit policy we had.
And what kind of deals were you into? Like, did you get to Did you have carte blanche and on bringing any kind of opportunities to the table, or do you have a heart for specific things that you had an eye for? What were you leaving on the table typically?
Everything. Because typically, you have a credit policy that tells you roughly what you can do and what you can't do. So what we used to do was either investment grade companies, so most of them were South African. And when I say South African, a lot of them were actually even listed in the UK. So fair enough, some of their assets or operations were in Africa, but the heart of the business was no longer in Africa. So we're talking...
I imagine like a Dimension Data or something like that.
Not Dimension Data, although they were acquired by a Japanese company, but the likes of Anglo American, Anglo Gold, De Beers, all these guys. But then, to be fair, we also work with a lot of South African companies. But then again, that's because South Africa was investment grade until recently.
Officially in recession now, the economy, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, to be honest, when I saw that, I was thinking about my colleagues, thinking, God Almighty, I feel sorry for them, because they probably have to write thousands of reports and explaining that, okay, it's in the economy, but it's in recession, but it should be fine. Don't panic.
You must be so glad you're far from that fire.
Absolutely. Honestly, whenever I hear some bad news coming out of South Africa, I feel for South Africa, I feel for Africa, but I also feel for my former colleagues, because I know exactly that they'll get, very anxious and worried phone calls from Tokyo, from the head office, and saying, what's going on there? We're going to lose money. What's your strategy to cover us? And what are you going to do? And shall we pull out? And I was like, wait, just hold on a second. Just, calm down. And this is the situation. So it was a lot of explaining, a lot.
The analogy of leaving stuff on the table. In Africa, you don't leave anything on your plate. You certainly don't leave the table till you're finished, and you stay calm through the meal, right?
Absolutely. But in that case, it was run, exactly, run. I mean, to be honest, one guy, there was a senior Japanese guy who told me, listen, we are not in, because I was like pushing for, I can't remember which transaction it was, but to me, it was like a really good transaction, good return. And I said, listen, we have to do this. And he was like, listen, we are not in the business of making money. We are in the business of not losing money. So if we're going to lend money, it has to be uber secured so that we don't lose any money. Forget about the returns. I'm like, okay, if that's a philosophy, what can I do?
That is absolutely crazy. And the reason this is of interest to me is, as part of what's happening here at Afrobytes Tech Conference 2017, we're trying to profile, in addition to sort of having meaningful conversations that end up in action, in getting business done. I think it's so useful to get inside the psyche of the global investor, right? And whether they're sitting in Tokyo, heck, anywhere on the continent, perhaps in the West somewhere. Now more than ever, so important to understand like the institutional thinking, the independent thinking that goes into investment decisions from around the world. What would you say from your experience in Tokyo do you think is applicable to some of the institutional investment stereotypes that we've come to expect? Because really, you're playing into some of my notions of what's wrong or not adequately geared for the future institutional investment is in terms of where the world is going. How much of that experience is typical, do you think, of the institutional investor on a global scale?
Sadly, I think it's very typical. Sadly, I think it's you'll be very surprised when, to see that people will make a decision based on hunches, based on hearsay, based on something they've seen on TV, irrespective of the hardcore facts. Because let me tell you something. During the 2008 crisis, a lot of big companies in the world went bankrupt. How many went bankrupt in Africa? 0. That's a fact, but they won't hear it. Because the minute you mention Africa, it comes with all sort of stereotypes, all sort of prejudice, and it's very difficult to fight that.
And so what served you best in terms of what you gleaned in your corporate career now approaching a tech startup?
I think, from the beginning, the credibility. Simply because the fact is that I've worked in the city for many years, and they will think, probably in their mind, they'll be like, he's all right. It's like they won't necessarily look at what I'm doing, but from the outset, they'll be like, he was educated there, he worked there, he speaks so many languages, we can talk to him.
He's vetted.
Exactly, which is very, and to be honest, even if I have to go, if I am, it's going to be a bit controversial, but if I go beyond that, that's why you have a lot of white people, I mean, no disrespect, but who become African experts when they don't know anything about Africa. But the fact is, they are Harvard educated and they went on a safari and they become, Kenyan expert. And when I go back to the Silicon Valley, people are happy to talk to them. Why? Because they can relate to them. They know that, okay, he went to Harvard, and if he's telling me Kenya is good, then I can consider Kenya. Whereas if you can be Kenyan living in Kenya, you can be telling these same people that Kenya is a great place to come. They'll be like, yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Sure. So that's quite an admission, and really big of you to be honest about this.
No, but it's true. The fact is, when you look at a lot of the African tech conferences, and I tend to go to quite a few of them, be it in London, here in Paris, or wherever, you will have a pretty fair number of white people. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, and I don't want to sound like I'm racist, but it's just a fact. It's just a comment that that's how you attract investors as well. If you go to the Silicon Valley as a guy from Zim, from a small town village in Zim, no matter how good your idea is, no matter how smart you are, it's going to be much more difficult than if you were educated in Ivy League and white, and they can relate to you. It's not necessarily racism. It's just like they can relate to you. And the same thing is applicable to Japan, by the way. I could tell them anything about Africa. They'd be like, yeah, okay, but you're African and you're pushing your business. Whereas a Japanese that I would take to Africa for the first time, if he likes it, when he comes back and say, oh yeah, I went to Africa, it's great, then all of a sudden it's okay.
Wow, sure. So from a character perspective, what is this? How does this shape you as a man, as a businessman, as a startup founder? And how do you keep it from, one, making you bitter, if that's something you want to stay away from, if you're like me, that's something you want to avoid, but also, two, how do you keep it from becoming counterproductive to the pragmatism you need to have as a businessman to get on with things?
Well, there's no bitterness. There's a bit of frustration, simply because sometimes you want to get things done and then it takes forever because you have to have one guy saying that he's okay when he doesn't even know what he's talking about. Yes, it can be frustrating, but to be honest, that doesn't stop me at all. I mean, I don't see it as an issue because, doing business in Africa is not easy anyway. So for me, it's just one of the many hurdles. And I actually like it in a very twisted way. I'm not that I'm I like it in this because my thinking is, if there are so many hurdles to overcome, then it means, I have to be resilient, because if I give up now, somebody is not going to give up and is going to continue. Then he's the one who's going to be successful. So for me, it's just like the more barriers, I take it as barrier entry to the market I'm trying to penetrate. So I see it in a twisted way as a positive. And also in terms of culture, one thing I didn't necessarily say is I'm from Cameroon, but I grew up in Germany. I studied in France, and I live in the UK. So I'm used to the very different cultures and
being an outsider.
Oh yes, no, but that's given. I was always the black guy in the class, and
do you like basketball? That guy.
Yeah, that guy. Or when I started my career with Lehman Brothers, I was like, did you get here through the affirmative action? I was like, I didn't even know what it was, to be honest, because it's such an American thing. But they used to ask me that a lot, and I said, what is this? Or so they would either ask that or think I was the copy boy, because I was the only black guy on the floor. So they thought, he must be the copy boy.
A guy who dies first in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. But again, I don't mind. To me, it's just ignorance, and it just flies over my head. I don't know. I don't care.
Toro Oreiro says of Draper Dark Flow, he says that being underestimated is his secret weapon.
It is. I actually like it because, you're the underdog. They don't expect anything from you. You're the nice black guy, just like, that's all right. It works for me. So I have less pressure. I can do my thing, prepare my move, and bam, here I am.
So tell me now, market research now is an opportunity. Why market research, and how are you leveraging taking away that perhaps hasn't been done before, or perhaps done in this way to elicit a certain result? And I'm sure because of your financial background, you've crunched the numbers. What's the opportunity here, bro?
Well, the fact is there's a gap, there's a lack of data in Africa. Be it historical data or actual data, it's very difficult to get a clear picture of what's going on. Obviously, you have different players using different technique. And, for me, I thought, wait a minute, if you want to hear the voice of the customer, if you want to collect data, the best way to go about it is to ask people directly, right? Now, the second question was, how do you access these people? Are you going to hire interviewer and send them on the street so that they can stop people randomly and ask them questions, which is going to be intrusive, and it's going to take time, and you cannot really scale it. And then I thought, wait a minute, we had this technological leap where we moved from 100,000 landline in Nigeria in 1980 to something like, what's the number? I think like 60 million subscribers or something.
Mobile subscribers, yeah?
Yeah, sorry, mobile phone subscribers. So you have this 60 million or whatever the number is who have a mobile phone, so you can ask them directly. And then the question is, but why would they bother answering? Because you incentivize them. We pay them through the mobile money. So you answer a question within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you get money on your wallet. So that's incentive. And obviously, mobile phone operators like the concept because it means, you help to make the mobile money widespread because adopting it, and people also use data to send you the information. So, they're quite happy with that.
And they're keeping you on the network and off those pesky OTTs.
Exactly.
Okay. Until you figure out a way to do it on WhatsApp.
Shh, don't mention.
Okay. Sorry?
Don't mention it.
Okay. All right. So typically what kind of research is possible? There must be, given my limited exposure to market research as a field, I've dabbled in that field. And I mean, there must be limitations to what sort of data you can extract, or are they? Or is comprehensive, or should I say sophisticated market research possible via mobile phone?
First of all, in terms of the questions we can answer, we can do alphanumeric questions. So we can ask you, open or close question. We can ask you sequential questions like, do you smoke? If the answer is yes, you get this question. If the answer is no, you get another question. We can get pictures, so we can ask you, hey, take a picture of your favorite restaurant or whatever it is. We can also take geolocalization. If let's say our customer is a brewery and they want to know where you normally have your beer after work, then you get the geolocalization of the bar you go to. So that's the kind of data they are interested in. So we do a lot of quantitative data is not an issue. It's more qualitative data that is a bit more tricky because quantitative data requires a lot more questioning, a lot of nuances, and typically you can ask that via a smartphone, but the problem is that people tend to be a bit lazy in terms of texting, so they're not going to text forever, like I feel like blah, blah, blah. So the answers tend to be shorter. I don't know.
But I mean, given the kind of information you're talking about, pretty rich information still, given the stuff that actually makes a difference in terms of insight.
It's very rich. I mean, it's very rich because, you really hear the voice of the customer. To give you an example, you can be the national railway company, and you ask me, you want to do a satisfaction survey, right? So I'll ask all sort of questions. Do you like the customer experience? Were people helpful? Did you find all the information? Do you think the train is clean? If it's not clean, take a picture as an evidence. Where do you get a ticket? So you get the GPS location. So you get a lot of information. And by the way, you also get the profile of the people responding, obviously, their gender, age, social category, and where they live, etc., etc.
Cleaned, of course, and of like personal detail, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Actually, although we give the first name, but not the last name. But it's kind of, it remains anonymous. And so not only do the company get that kind of very rich information, but also don't forget that they communicate, because the people know who they are, who the customer, the survey is for. I mean, that depends on the customer. If the customer is happy for people to know, then that's fine. We can let them know. If they don't want it, we can make it anonymous,
and they get less money.
No, actually, it doesn't matter.
People don't seem to mind sharing information in that regard.
Well, it's a condition. If you don't want to do if you don't want to share information, then you can't do the questionnaire. But coming back to the customers who get a lot of information on a real-time basis, by the way, because they have access to an online dashboard. they also communicate because you know that company X is paying you to answer, and they tend to communicate around that and say, we're socially responsible. We want to hear your voice because you matter to us, and by the way, we are giving you money for your next purchase.
So this works into a CRM strategy, et cetera, et cetera.
So social responsibility, et cetera, absolutely.
Okay, so last few questions. Where are you making the solution? Who's your team? Like, where's your makeup? And what's the footprint of the business?
Well, we work with digital. I mean, we have a lot of freelancers a bit everywhere in the world, including in Africa. We have an excellent guy in Kenya. So there are 7 of us. The footprint in terms of operation is Cameroon and Ivory Coast, where we have 2 legal entities in Cameroon in Ivory Coast, and we are just in the process of rolling out operations. We've already done a few gigs, but now we are moving to the next phase of being a bit more aggressive in terms of marketing and growing the business.
MVP in the bag. We're going for the big time now.
Yep. That's it.
All right. Well, listen. It really has been a pleasure chatting. Thank you, Jean-Paul Melaga. Is that correct?
Melaga, oui, très bien, very good.
Jean-Paul Melaga of Smart Phorce, and that's Force with a PH, folks. Not that silly proper spelling, okay? So smartphorce.com, check them out. Thank you so much, man, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.